Today is Saturday. It's October the 9th, 2021. And the title of today's devotional is Joy to the World. The Lord is come. Now our scripture reading, two Psalms, Psalm 97 and Psalm 98. And my opinion is that they are both prophetic in their application. I would suggest to you that they describe and depict the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, let's look first at Psalm 97, and then we'll look at Psalm 98. Psalm 97, we find in the first 6 verses that the Lord is on his throne. Christ is represented, the Lord is represented as reigning as king, and all the inhabitants of the earth rejoice. And that time has not yet come. We know that. But God is described here as ruling in all of his majesty. He is seen in judgment, a righteous judgment. He is a just God, holy. In fact, verse 3 says, Fire goeth before him, and burneth up his enemies round about. The earth trembles, and nothing can stand in the presence of a holy God. Verse 6 encourages those who are believers that the heavens declare God's righteousness, and all the people see his glory. Now, verse 7 points to that time of God's judgment when the heathen will be shamed and confused. The word in the scriptures is, verse 7, is confounded. Why are they confounded? Why are they confused? Because Christ reigns, and now the heathen realize they have worshiped graven images. They have worshiped and made for themselves idols that are not God's at all. The psalmist in Psalm 135, verses 15 through 17, describes idols in these terms. Verse 15 of Psalm 135, they are the work of men's hands. And then verse 16 to 17 is somewhat of a humorous description, but a sad one as well, for all who worship idols, that they have mouths but they don't speak, they have eyes and they don't see, they have ears and they don't hear. And then he goes on to say, neither is there any breath in their mouths. In other words, they are dead. They're not gods at all. Now, the result of the confusion of the heathen is found in verse 8 and 9, and that is that the saints of God rejoice. They realize that the God whom they have worshiped is a God who is high above all the earth and above all gods. Now, verse 10 through 12, the righteous, and we find the righteous and God's blessing. Now, one of the characteristics of the righteous is found in verse 10 of Psalm 97, and it describes them in this way, that they hate evil. What does that mean? That is, they hate the evil way. They hate the path. They hate the sins that lead to destruction. They love the Lord, and therefore they keep their feet from wickedness. As a result of that, the Lord watches over them. He guards them. He preserves them. Now, we see in the world that the righteous are often hated. They're often persecuted. But we're reminded in verse 10 that there is a day that the Lord will save them all the righteous, out of the hand of the wicked. Now that brings us to Psalm 98. And I've titled Psalm 98, Sing unto the Lord a New Song. Some of the words of Psalm 98 are going to be very familiar to you. They are, as I've said earlier, they're a reflection on the second coming of Christ. But Psalm 98 was the psalm that inspired Isaac Watts' memorable hymn, Joy to the World. Now, you might recognize that hymn. It's usually heard in churches in December, about the time that the birth of Christ is celebrated. But Psalm 98 has absolutely nothing to do with the birth of Christ. It has everything to do with the second coming of Christ. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. That is fulfilled in the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now notice with me, there are 3 stanzas of 3 verses long in Psalm 98. The first stanza I would describe as Sing unto the Lord a new song. And the question would be, what is this new song? It is a song of victory. It is a song of praise. It is a song of redemption. It is a song of rejoicing that the Lord is true. That is, he is faithful and he has not forgotten his people. The second stanza, Psalm 98, verses 4 through 6, is a call to all nations to worship the Lord. Now you're going to notice in verses 4 through 6 that we see a description of the musicians in the temple. Now these musicians were trained. They were Levites. Their whole life was dedicated to serving and worshiping the Lord with either their voices or with their instruments. Now, we see a description found here. The sound of their voices and instruments is described as a joyful noise, a loud noise. But is it a noise? And the answer is no. The meaning of the word noise there is a shout, a cry of triumph. And so joyful noise, loud noise is not noisy instruments as we might find in contemporary churches today, but it is a joyful sound of triumph, a celebration, if you would. The music of the tabernacle and later the temple was never meant to entertain the congregation. The focus of the music was the Lord and His holiness. Now, the instruments that are named here, the harp, wind instruments, trumpets, and cornets, the focus of all, both the voices and the instruments, was to worship the Lord, the King. And then that brings us to the third and the final stanza. Verse 7 through 9 is really a call to creation, all of God's creation, to worship the Lord. Now, we live in a world right now that faces violent storms, earthquakes, and yes, even pandemics. They all remind us, according to Romans 8 and verse 22, that creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together. Now, why is that? And the answer is because of sin. Man's sin, Adam and Eve's sin, and the sin and the curse of sin that has passed upon all of us also brought a curse upon creation according to Genesis. And so creation itself right now groaneth. But there is a day that creation will celebrate the second coming of Christ and the fact that He reigns. When will that happen? When He reigns as judge of the earth in righteousness and He rights the wrongs. Now think about that. The next time you sing, "Joy to the world, the Lord is come." There is a day that is coming that there will be a reign of peace throughout this earth for 1,000 years. And that will not take place until Christ sits upon His throne in Jerusalem. God bless and bye-bye.